Steve Jobs, 1955 to 2011. The ones who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who do.
Intro. Steve Jobs was born February 24th, 1955. He later passed away of pancreatic cancer October 5th, 2011. Pancreatic cancer is an aggressive form of cancer that develops in the tissues of the pancreas. Located in the abdomen behind the lower part of the stomach, the pancreas aids in digestion.
Basic history of Steve Jobs. When it comes to Steve Jobs and his overall history, there are many things to take into account. On February 24th, 1955, Steve Jobs was born in San Francisco and later would be known for running Apple, one of the greatest computer companies ever. He starts his journey by getting his first job at Atari. Later, co-founded the early Apple I board with his high school friend, Steve Wozniak. In 1976, they sell their computers to enthusiasts and later show it off at the local Personal Computing Festival in Atlantic City. In 1980, Apple goes public, increasing Steve Jobs' net worth from millions to over $200 million. On January 30th of 1986, he buys Pixar for $10 million, and the first film is praised by experts as one of the first computer animated works of art. In April of 1986, Steve Jobs is named Entrepreneur of the Decade by Incorporated magazine. Fast forward, and Steve Jobs is later diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and passes away on October 5th, 2011. Economics and social responsibility of Steve Jobs. Economics. When it comes to Steve Jobs and his economics, when he originally started Apple with Steve Wozniak, he was valued at millions. When he later went public, his net worth skyrocketed to over $200 million, and at his death, he owned over $10.2 billion, and his estate was worth roughly $19 billion. On his deathbed of October 5th, 2011, this totals to an astronomical $29.2 billion. One other important thing to note is that according to a Mac Rumors article posted in 1996, that Apple almost went bankrupt due to lack of innovation. At his deathbed and at current times, Apple is the highest valued company in the entire world. Its total value is over $534 billion, as of statistics listed on a February 4th, 2016 Fortune article. Social responsibility. In the opinions of most, Steve Jobs was fairly irresponsible in terms of social responsibility. According to the New York Times, there is no public record of Mr. Jobs giving to charity. His personal motto is that money doesn't matter to him. It's humorous how much attention his wealth gets, and all money should be used to further the company. His form of giving back is the products Apple sells to the public. That and Apple's excessive innovation that continues to change the world.
Ethic and social responsibility. From a human being's perspective, Steve Jobs was a managerial bully in his company. He was obsessively controlled and given to fits of rage, throwing tantrums and yell at employees and board members. He could tear down someone's ideas in public displays. Some have said he took credit for others' ideas, and his confidence led to a sort of over-the-top arrogance. He was being an authoritarian leader to the Chinese factory that approached sweatshop conditions. 14 workers committed suicide in Apple's Foxconn factory in China because of the working condition being similar to labor camps and due to the widespread worker abuse and illegal overtime. Later, Apple forced the workers to sign a document that they would not sue the company as a result of unexpected deaths, self-injury, or suicide. Apple also bribes the workers for $1,200 to $1,400, about 7,970 yen to 9,299 yen. From a company's perspective, he was a successful leader. He helped the company become the world's most valuable company. He worked hard, chose bright, capable people to work with him, and was supremely confident. He was the one that changed the world. Without him, the tech and the entertainment industry would not be as good as they are today. And without his unique ability to execute the new ideas and push the tech industry to where it needs to go, we would all be a little worse off.
Forms of ownership, entrepreneurship. Steve Jobs is best known for Pixar and more noticeably Apple, the world's most valuable company. In his early life, he co-founded Apple with Steve Wozniak. His first entrepreneurial effort was selling Blue Box with Steve Wozniak. Blue Box worked by producing certain tones that were used in the telephone system to switch long-distance calls. Blue Box allowed you to make a long-distance call. You could use the box to enter operator mode, then use it to route your call as you wanted and to wherever you wanted, all for free and extremely difficult to trace, making Blue Box a popular item amongst various criminal elements. He later co-founded Apple in the garage of 2066 Christ Drive in Los Altos, California. He is later fired by the CEO he hired. Starts the NEXT computer company, buys George Lucas's computer graphics, starts Pixar, sells Next to Apple, and becomes Apple's CEO. He later dies on October 5th, 2011, from pancreatic cancer. During his entire life, he was either employed at Atari, a co-founder, working for Apple, or the CEO of Apple.
Born 1955, later adopted by Paul and Carla Jobs. One of the parents were a mechanic and the other was an accountant. His father never graduated high school, and his mother never graduated college. Steve was a competitive swimmer. He was interested in electronics and gadgets due to spending much time with his neighbor who worked at Hewlett-Packard Company, a computer company. Steve Jobs' biological mother told his adoptive parents that her only wish was that he graduated college. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak called their company Apple Computers, in memory of a happy summer job they had spent picking apples and raised $1,300.
Cultural norms. When it comes to Steve Jobs and the cultural norms he presents the company's think different mindset within Apple's cult-like culture. Steve Jobs has millions of devotees who cling to Apple's product, and Steve Jobs with a nearly religious intensity. In many aspects, Steve Jobs managed to single-handedly place his personal imprint on a company. It's one of the many reasons why people constantly return to Apple. He's similar to a celebrity. They buy his products because they adore him. In many aspects, people see Steve Jobs as the Da Vinci of our time. This is a large reason why his customers and employees follow him so religiously. He would consistently create the next big thing, draw people in, had a cult or religious-like following, and in many aspects would most likely incorporate cultural normalities within his and his innovators' thinking.
Globalization. As of July 2013, Apple has developed 417 retail stores in 13 countries and online stores available in 38 countries. Apple Inc. realized the significance of globalization by spreading all over the world. If an iPhone, for example, was made in the USA, its retail value would be $2,000 because you're including material and labor together. Labor is expensive, so that's why Apple prefers Apple products are made out of the States for cheaper, and they only pay $5 per unit. The chart on the right is showing us how much employees wage is in the U.S. compared to overseas. The pie chart to the left is showing what percentage of revenue is made in the corresponding regions.
Is Steve Jobs a good leader, and will you want him as a CEO? Being a businessman, Steve Jobs is a good leader. I don't think anyone can refute about this. He is the one that made Apple great, made the world great. Not many businessmen can be as great as him, and no one will replace his status in people's mind. But being his employees and workers, Steve Jobs is not a good leader by the way how he treated them. In my opinion, it is very hard to say if a person is good or bad, but because everyone has a different perspective. A different perspective will change the way how people think about him, and no one is perfect. Everyone does good and bad things. When you see someone does bad things, you will not look at what things he or she does good is good, same as the other way. In my opinion, I do want him as a CEO. Who doesn't? Who doesn't want a CEO that can make the company becomes the world's most valuable company? Of course, no one can make a company great by himself. As what Steve Jobs says, great things in business are never done by one person. They are done by a team of people.